Behind every easy sibling is a mountain of silent sacrifices no one ever sees, until the day the mountain moves. This is the story of how my own family tried to take away the only home I had left, and how I learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to disappear anymore. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The crisp October wind rattled the old window panes of Vale Books and Stories as I sat behind the worn oak counter, coffee gone cold in my mug. My phone pinged just another email. I opened it without thinking, and the world stopped. Public auction notice. Vale Books and Stories. Property to be sold by order of majority owners. Vesper Vale and Leander Vale. Date, November 12th, 30 days from today. Signed, Vesper Vale. My own sister. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. 10 years. 10 years of my life poured into these four walls, and she had the nerve to sign her name like it was just another business transaction. No call, no warning, no Cassian, we need to talk. Nothing. This story isn't just about a family tearing itself apart over money. It's about what happens when the person who was supposed to protect your dreams becomes the one who sells them out from under you, and what it takes to finally stop letting them. My hands started shaking. I set the phone down slowly, as if it might explode if I moved too fast. The morning light filtered through the tall front windows, catching dust motes dancing above the shelves like tiny ghosts. Outside, maple leaves burned red and gold against a gray Vermont sky. Inside, the store smelled of old paper, vanilla candles, and the faint trace of cinnamon from yesterday's story hour for the kids. I stood up, my legs felt unsteady. 10 years ago, this place was drowning in debt after Dad passed. Vesper wanted to sell it immediately. "It's just a building, Cassian," she'd said over the phone from her sleek office in Boston. Leander had agreed, of course. He always did. But I couldn't let it go. This store wasn't just bricks and books to me. It was the last place where Dad read me stories in the back corner, the only place that still felt like home. So I stayed. I worked double shifts, poured every dollar I made from freelance editing into keeping the lights on. I built the children's reading program from nothing. I started writing workshops that brought authors from all over New England. I organized poetry nights, mystery book clubs, even a summer storytelling festival that drew families from 3 counties. Year after year, I kept this sanctuary alive while Vesper and Leander collected their quarterly checks and posted pictures of their vacations on Facebook. And now, they were selling it. Without telling me, I walked slowly between the tall wooden shelves, my fingers brushing the spines of books I knew by heart. The creak of the old floorboards under my boots sounded louder than usual. In the children's section, tiny, colorful chairs still sat in a circle from yesterday's session. A forgotten crayon drawing of a dragon lay on the rug. My chest tightened. How many nights had I slept on that old couch in the back room because I couldn't afford to hire more help? How many times had I told worried customers with a smile, "Don't worry, we're not going anywhere"? I had believed my own lie. A soft knock on the front door made me flinch. It was only Mrs. Callahan, our regular Tuesday customer, waving through the glass with her usual bright smile. I forced myself to wave back, but my face felt frozen. I couldn't let her see. Not yet. I slipped into the narrow hallway that led to the storage room and leaned against the cool wall, breathing hard. The scent of aged paper wrapped around me like an old blanket. Memories flooded in uninvited. Dad's laugh echoing through the store. The way he used to let me stamp the due dates on library cards when I was 8. Vesper rolling her eyes at us from behind the counter. Back then we were still a family. Now Vesper had quietly prepared every document. She had contacted investors from that big chain bookstore. She and Leander had made decisions that would erase everything I had bled for, and they hadn't even had the decency to look me in the eye. My throat burned. I pulled out my phone again and stared at the auction notice. The cold legal language stared back at me. 30 days. Just 30 days until this place, my sanctuary, would belong to strangers. The anger came slow at first, like a deep underground river finally breaking through rock. Then it mixed with something sharper. Hurt. The kind that sits behind your ribs and makes every breath feel heavy. I had always been the quiet one, the reliable one, the brother who didn't make trouble, the son who stayed behind to carry everything after Dad died. And they had counted on that. They had counted on me staying silent. I looked around the store one more time, at the faded sign above the children's corner that I had painted myself, at the reading nook where so many kids had discovered their first love of stories, at the counter where I had balanced the books late into so many nights. A single tear escaped before I could stop it. I wiped it away quickly, angry at myself for the weakness. No more. I crumpled the printed email in my fist until the paper bit into my palm. This was my home, my work, my heart. And for the first time in 10 years, I realized something with crystal clarity. I wasn't going to let them take it without a fight. Not this time. The cold Vermont wind howled softly outside as I stood alone among the silent shelves, the auction notice still trembling slightly in my hand. The door clicked shut behind the last customer of the day, and the store fell into a heavy silence. I stood motionless behind the counter, the crumpled auction notice still clutched in my fist. The October light had faded into a cold gray dusk, leaving long shadows stretching across the wooden floors like fingers reaching for something they could never hold again. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the quiet cost of always being the one who stays, and what finally happens when that weight becomes too heavy to carry in silence. I sank onto the old stool behind the register, my shoulders slumping as if someone had cut the strings that had been holding me upright for years. The ache in my chest wasn't sharp anymore. It was deep. Bone deep, the kind that settles in and makes every breath feel like work. 10 years, I closed my eyes and let the memories come, slow and unrelenting. Nights I stayed until 2 in the morning, balancing the books by the dim glow of a desk lamp because the electric bill had crept up again. Mornings I drove 40 minutes to the wholesale warehouse before the sun rose, using my own savings to buy new releases so the shelves wouldn't look empty. Weekends I spent painting signs, rearranging displays, and staying late after story hour to clean up spilled juice and scattered crayons, while the laughter of children still echoed in my ears. All of it done with my own hands, my own money, my own quiet hope that this place could survive. And Vesper? She came back twice a year, always smiling for the camera, posing with a stack of books in front of the window like she was the one who kept the lights on. Leander would tag along, laughing too loud, posting pictures with captions about family legacy before disappearing back to his life in New York. They took their share of the profits every quarter. They never asked how I made it possible. A soft vibration broke the stillness. My phone lit up on the counter. Aunt Elowen. I stared at her name for a long moment before answering. Cassian, honey. Your sister called me. Her voice was gentle, the way it always was when she tried to smooth things over. She said there's been some tension about the store. Maybe we can all sit down and talk like family? I swallowed hard. The words were there, sharp, angry, ready, but they stayed locked behind my teeth. I had spent years learning not to speak them, not to cause waves, not to be the difficult one. I'm fine, Aunt Elowen, I said quietly. My voice sounded strange even to me, hollow. She kept talking, offering the same careful words she always did. You know how Vesper is. She's just practical. And Leander, well, he follows her lead, but blood is blood, sweetheart. We don't want this tearing the family apart. I listened without really hearing. My free hand traced the edge of the counter, feeling the grooves worn smooth by a decade of my own fingers resting there. When she finally paused, I only said, "Thank you for calling," and hung up. Another message came minutes later. Cousin Thorne this time. Hey man, heard things are messy with the store. You good? Let's grab a beer sometime and figure this out. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked slowly through the aisles, the floorboards creaking under my weight. Each step stirred up faint memories I had tried so hard to bury. The corner where Dad used to sit reading aloud to me after closing. The spot near the window where I once cried alone the first Christmas after he was gone. The back room where I had fallen asleep more nights than I could count, exhausted but strangely at peace because this store was still breathing. Now it felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Why had I let it go this far? The question burned hotter with every passing minute. Why had I believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, gave more, they would eventually see? That Vesper would stop treating me like the convenient brother who fixed everything? That Leander would stop seeing me as the background character in their version of the family story? I stopped in front of the children's section. The colorful rug was still scattered with a few forgotten picture books. I knelt down and picked one up, a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. My thumb brushed over the cover, remembering the dozens of little voices that had giggled and gasped as I read it aloud week after week. A wave of shame washed over me, sudden and suffocating. I had been so proud of what I built here, so certain that my silence was strength, that my sacrifices were noble. But tonight, standing alone in the dimming light, I saw it clearly for the first time. They had never seen me as a partner. They had seen me as convenient, the easy brother, the one who didn't complain, the one who would keep the store running so they could live their lives without guilt or responsibility. My hands clenched at my sides until my knuckles turned white. The pain in my chest shifted. It didn't disappear. It transformed, slowly, painfully, into something colder, clearer. A quiet, terrifying clarity. I wasn't angry in the loud, screaming way I once imagined I would be. This was deeper, heavier. It was the realization that I had spent 10 years pouring my life into a family that only remembered I existed when they needed something from me. And for the first time, I didn't want to be that person anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. The fear was still there, whispering that I might lose everything I had worked for, that confronting them could shatter what little was left of our family. But beneath the fear, something else was stirring. A resolve I hadn't felt in years. I looked around the store one last time as the streetlights outside flickered on, casting a pale glow through the windows. This place had been my sanctuary, but sanctuaries weren't meant to be prisons, and I was finally starting to understand. I had the power to walk out of this one, even if it meant burning the cage behind me. The old floorboards groaned under my feet as I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic above the store. Dust floated in the thin beam of my flashlight, dancing like secrets that had been waiting years to be spoken. I wasn't sure I was ready for what I was about to do, but staying silent any longer felt like dying slowly. This story isn't just about losing something you love. It's about finding the courage to build something new when the people who should have stood beside you choose to tear it down instead. And discovering that true strength often begins in the quietest decisions. The attic smelled of old wood and forgotten paper. A single bare bulb hummed to life when I pulled the chain. In the corner, behind stacks of unsold boxes, Lena Moreau and Marcus Reed were already waiting. Lena had been with the store for 14 years. She had seen me work through sleepless nights, watched me smile for customers while my eyes were red from crying in the back room. She didn't say much when I called her earlier, only, "I'll be there." That was enough. Marcus sat on an old wooden crate, his hands clasped tightly. He was the first local author I had ever helped publish. I had spent months editing his manuscript for free, introduced him to readers, and hosted his launch right downstairs. He owed me nothing, yet here he was. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I swallowed, my throat tight. "They're selling the store," I said quietly. My voice barely carried across the small space. In 30 days, Vesper and Leander already signed everything. They never even asked me. Lena's face tightened. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "I figured something was wrong when you didn't answer my texts yesterday. Cassian, I've watched you pour your soul into this place. Are you really going to let them take it?" I hesitated. Fear coiled cold in my stomach. Part of me still wanted to protect them, to make excuses, to believe that if I just tried harder, the family might not break. But I was tired of protecting people who never protected me. "I'm not letting them take everything," I said. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they also felt true. "I want to build something new, something that's mine, something they can't touch. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes sharp with quiet intensity. What do you have in mind? I pulled out a worn notebook from my jacket and opened it under the weak light. My handwriting filled the pages, years of ideas I had scribbled late at night when I couldn't sleep. I own the rights to every workshop, every storytelling program, every reading series I created here. The children's curriculum, the mystery nights, the author talks, they're all mine, not the store's. Mine. Lena's eyes widened slightly. A small, careful smile touched her lips. You kept records. I did. We talked for hours in that dusty attic, voices low, as if the walls themselves might betray us. We sketched plans on the back of old inventory sheets. A new space, smaller at first, more intimate. A place where stories weren't just sold, but truly lived. We named it Forge and Page. Forge, because we would build it from fire and determination. Page, because everything still began with a single sheet of paper and a heart that refused to quit. There were moments of doubt. My hands shook when I imagined Vesper finding out. My chest tightened every time I pictured Leander's face when he realized I wasn't going to quietly disappear. Aunt Elowen's disappointed sigh echoed in my mind. Even Cousin Thorne's casual texts felt heavier now. What if I failed? What if I burned every bridge and ended up with nothing? But every time the fear rose, I looked at Lena and Marcus. Lena, who had quietly stayed late so many nights just to help me close. Marcus, who still remembered how I had believed in his book when no one else did. They believed in me now. By the time the attic grew cold and the town outside had gone completely quiet, we had the beginning of a plan. Lena would reach out to a few trusted contacts about a vacant storefront on the edge of the square. Marcus would quietly spread the word among his writer friends. And I would start moving the things that truly belonged to me. Not the building, not the old shelves, but the heart of what I had built. As we stood to leave, Lena placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Her voice was soft but steady. You don't have to do this alone anymore, Cassian. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Stepping out into the cold Vermont night, the air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and coming frost, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, whispering warnings. The sadness of what I was about to lose still pressed heavy against my ribs. But beneath it all, for the first time in years, there was a small, flickering flame of hope. I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was walking towards something. And though the road ahead felt uncertain and terrifying, I finally understood that staying in the shadows of someone else's expectations had been the real prison all along. The first step into the unknown had been taken. Now, there was no turning back. The night air carried the sharp bite of late autumn as strings of warm lights glowed across the front of the old brick building on Maple Square. A simple wooden sign hung above the door, Forge and Page, its letters freshly painted in deep charcoal and gold. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could barely breathe. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about the moment you finally stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace, and discover that some people only respect you once you refuse to disappear. Inside, the space hummed with life. Nearly 200 people had shown up, far more than I had dared to hope. Families filled the children's corner. Old customers from Vale Books wandered between the new shelves, their faces lighting up with quiet recognition. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, while the scent of fresh coffee and warm apple cider drifted through the room. Lena moved gracefully behind the counter, smiling as she handed out programs. Marcus stood near the front, shaking hands and introducing people to the lineup of upcoming workshops. I stayed near the back at first, watching everything unfold like a dream I was afraid would shatter. Then the door opened again, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vesper Vale stepped inside first, her tailored coat still carrying the crisp scent of Boston. Leander followed close behind, his usual easy smile frozen on his face. Their eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on me. The shock on their faces was immediate. Vesper's lips parted slightly. Leander's shoulders stiffened. They both stared at the familiar storytelling circle. at the children already gathered with books in their laps, at the display of rare first editions I had quietly moved from the old store, books I had collected and protected with my own money over the years. This wasn't just a new bookstore. It was their old world, rebuilt without them. I felt my stomach twist. For one terrifying second, the old instinct rose, the desire to explain, to smooth things over, to make myself smaller so they wouldn't be uncomfortable. But I didn't move. Vesper cut through the crowd toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. Leander stayed a step behind, his eyes darting nervously between the guests and me. "Cassian," Vesper said, her voice low but tight with anger. "What is this?" Before I could answer, Aunt Elowen appeared from the side, her face pale with worry. She reached out and gently but firmly took my arm, pulling me toward a quieter corner near the back wall. "Sweetheart, please," she whispered urgently. "This isn't the way. We're family. Let's not do this in front of everyone. Your sister is hurt. Leander is confused. We can still fix this." Her hand trembled slightly on my sleeve. I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of the family splintering further. Fear of choosing sides. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had tried to keep peace at every holiday dinner, who had always told me to be the bigger person. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Aunt Elowen," I said softly. "I'm just done disappearing." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was Cousin Thorne. He had already posted in the town Facebook group. I had seen the notification earlier. "Some people forget blood is thicker than water. Sad to see betrayal in our own family." The words stung, but they no longer burned the way they once would have. I gently pulled my arm from Aunt Elowen's grasp and stepped back into the main room. The crowd had grown quieter, sensing the tension. Many eyes turned toward us. Vesper's voice rose just enough to carry. "You took everything. The programs, the readers, even the books you knew we wanted. After everything we've been through as a family, this is how you repay us?" Her words hit hard. For a brief second, old guilt tried to crawl back in. Memories of Dad's funeral, of Vesper crying in the kitchen, of Leander looking lost and small. But then I remembered the auction notice, the silence, the years of carrying everything alone. I looked straight at her, my voice steady even though my hands wanted to shake. "I didn't take anything, Vesper. I built it. For 10 years I kept that store alive while you and Leander collected the profits and lived your lives. I never asked for recognition. I never asked for thanks. But I'm done being the brother who exists only to make your lives easier." Leander stepped forward, his face flushed. "Come on, man. We're family." "No," I cut in quietly, but firmly. "Family doesn't sell your home from under you without a word. Family doesn't treat your life's work like it's disposable. I'm not your safety net anymore. And I'm not going to be the silent one who keeps sacrificing so you can feel comfortable." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then something unexpected happened. An older woman near the front, Mrs. Callahan, who had been coming to Story Hour for years, started to clap. Slowly at first, then others joined. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady, respectful applause that rippled through the crowd. Lena smiled softly from behind the counter. Marcus gave me a small, proud nod. Vesper's face went pale. Leander looked around, stunned, as if seeing the town choose sides for the first time. I didn't feel triumph, not really. What I felt was something quieter, deeper, relief, and a profound sadness that it had come to this. Aunt Elowen stood frozen near the wall, tears glistening in her eyes. Cousin Thorne's posts would keep coming. I knew that. More messages, more accusations, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. The night continued, the lights warm, the voices rising again with careful hope. Children laughed in the storytelling corner. New readers browsed the shelves with wonder, and I stood there in the center of a life I had finally chosen for myself, bruised, scared, but no longer invisible. The town had chosen sides, and for once, so had I. 3 months had passed since that tense opening night, and the Vermont winter had settled in with its quiet, unforgiving grace. Snow lay thick on the rooftops of Maple Square, muffling the world outside. I stood behind the counter of Forge and Page, watching soft flakes drift past the large front windows. The store was quiet now, just after closing, but the warmth of the day still lingered in the air. This story isn't about winning. It's about the deep, lasting peace that comes when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold, and learn that the strongest form of justice is often the quietest kind. The old Vale Books and Stories had been sold at auction. I heard through town gossip that it went for far less than Vesper and Leander had expected. Without the community programs, without the loyal readers, without the soul I had spent 10 years breathing into it, the building was just 4 walls and empty shelves. A stranger from out of state bought it. Someone who planned to turn it into a coffee chain. Vesper and Leander had to face that truth alone. I didn't call them. I didn't send messages. I simply kept building. Forge and Page had grown steadily. Word traveled fast in a small town. Families returned week after week. Writers from neighboring counties began hosting events here. Children filled the storytelling corner every Saturday morning, their laughter rising like music against the wooden beams. The space felt alive in a way the old store never had, because this time, it belonged to me. I never celebrated publicly. There were no victory posts, no sharp words thrown across social media. I simply showed up every day and did the work with steady hands. Some nights the old pain still visited me. I would remember the auction notice, Vesper's angry face under the warm lights, Aunt Elowen's trembling hand on my arm. Those memories no longer burned like fire, but they left a dull ache, a reminder of what had been lost. One cold evening in late January, just after the last customer left, the bell above the door rang softly. Leander stepped inside. Snow dusted his shoulders and melted slowly in his hair. He looked smaller than I remembered, his usual confidence replaced by something hesitant and raw. He closed the door behind him and stood there for a long moment, hands in his coat pockets, eyes moving across the shelves, the reading nooks, the children's corner still scattered with colorful cushions. Cassian, his voice cracked slightly on my name. I didn't speak right away. My heart tightened with old instinct, the urge to make things easier, to say it was okay, to carry the weight again. But I stayed silent and waited. He took a few slow steps forward, stopping near the counter. I drove up from New York today. Didn't tell Vesper, I just needed to see this place for myself. His gaze lingered on the handmade sign above the storytelling area, then dropped to the floor. I didn't know, he said finally, his words barely above a whisper. I didn't know how much you carried alone. All those years after Dad died, I thought the store was just running itself. Vesper made it sound like you were happy staying behind, that you liked being the one who handled everything. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening under the warm lights. I was wrong. You were holding us all up, and we never once asked how heavy it was for you. The silence between us stretched, filled only by the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the distant sound of wind against the windows. I felt 1,000 memories rise, nights I had fallen asleep on the old couch, mornings I had opened the store alone, holidays when I smiled through family dinners while feeling invisible. A tear slipped down Leander's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. I'm sorry, Cassian, for not seeing you, for letting Vesper take the lead without ever questioning it. You deserved better from your own brother. I felt my throat tighten. The hurt was still there, deep and real, but something else moved alongside it now, a quiet release. I'm not angry anymore, I said softly. Not the way I was. I can't go back to being the person who disappears so everyone else can stay comfortable. Leander nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his eyes. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. He simply stood there a little longer, then turned toward the door. Before he left, he paused and looked back. The town talks about this place like it's something special now. They're proud of what you built. Then he was gone, the bell ringing softly behind him. Aunt Elowen's calls had grown fewer and quieter over the weeks. Cousin Thorne had stopped posting entirely. The family storm had not disappeared, but it had settled into a distant, manageable silence. I locked the front door and walked slowly through the store, turning off lights one by one. The warm glow from the remaining lamps cast gentle shadows across the shelves. In the children's corner, a small stuffed bear sat tilted against a pillow, left behind by a little girl who had laughed through today's story time. I stopped in the middle of the room and just stood there. The weight I had carried for 10 years was no longer on my shoulders. Not all of it, anyway. Some scars would remain, but they no longer defined me. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the town in white. Inside Forge and Page, the air felt warm and full of possibility. I had stopped sacrificing myself for people who never learned to value me, and in doing so, I had rebuilt something beautiful from the ashes. As the last light dimmed, I smiled quietly to myself, not in triumph, but in peace. This was my story now, and for the first time in a very long time, it felt like mine. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.